DZRJ 810 AM, the voice of the Philippines, proudly brings you Equal Justice. Find out the hottest legal issues of the week and hear the analysis. And now, here are your hosts, Attorney Ador Tolentino.
Yes to peace, no to BBL.
Facebook yan.
Facebook. Okay, if you want to follow.
Attorney June Kicho.
Kailangan ano pa yun, comfort level eh.
Exactly.
And Attorney Tiki Tabuhara.
Vice President Binay, pati si Pinoy, pati si Executive Secretary, Chito.
Alright, good afternoon Philippines and good afternoon gentlemen in the studio. Good afternoon Tiki and June.
Good afternoon, Ador. Welcome back again to another episode of Equal Justice.
Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon. It's been, I think this week is a better week than last week because last Saturday was really gloomy Saturday, legally speaking.
Gloomy, huh?
Yeah. We were talking about that, Tiki, because that was also the time when the money laundering incident, issue was in full bloom, and then there came Kidapawan, the Kidapawan
how do you call it? Killing?
I just call it incident.
Well, I think it's more of a dispersal.
Yeah.
Kasi isa lang namatay, di ba?
Apat,
okay.
Tatlo ba? Tatlo.
So
And then there were 100 others injured.
Okay,
so it was a serious matter.
Both sides yan, no? There were injuries on both sides, no?
Yes.
So who are the protagonists here?
The police and the protesters.
Yung tatanong natin is who specifically are the protesters? Yung tatanong.
Yes.
Okay.
Linawin natin.
Based on newspaper and what we read in the online news sites, well, initially what was said was these are farmers who just wanted to air their grievances and ask for rice because.
So pa yung partner, North Cotabato?
Yes. They're farmers from Arakan, as I get it from that's in North Cotabato.
Okay.
They went to Kidapawan, blocked the road that connects Davao to North Cotabato.
You mean there's a highway?
Yata.
So it's the main highway.
Yes, they blocked it for 4 days. They were blocking it for 4 days.
Walang pwedeng dumaan.
Walang makadaan. So pati merchants walang makadaan, no? So to the others, I read other articles saying that they were already what they were doing was already economic sabotage. Okay? So that's the other side. Yes.
So that's why the need to disperse them.
This is actually a story that has its plot thickened, no, by the various voices, no, coming from the area. But the fact remains that 3 to 4 were killed.
Yes,
they were all farmers. Yes, and more than 100, I suppose, were injured.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's.
Sa police walang namatay.
Wala yata, pero may mga binugbog raw silang pulis, no? So, okay. Yes, and then the other, and then may mga story rin. There are also stories about them carrying very telling placards. That they were actually not just about rice. No, because this is actually a very good story
for slogans, you mean, of protesters.
Yes,
the usual down with the imperialism.
Something like that. Yes, and this is actually. On its face, this is something that really interests me because this is El Nino, no, affecting rice production and therefore affecting food security in the Philippines. As an environmental activist, that has always been right down my alley.
As an offshoot of
this, as it is, no.
Yes, as an offshoot of this incident, Pañeros, now come the question of human rights, violation of the right to freely express.
Well, accountability also for those who are injured and those who were killed.
Of course, yes.
So,
and for which reason?
Yes.
And for which reason?
Yes,
we have invited a resource person who, of course,
is the best person to talk about
human rights.
At least by his post. No?
Yes, by his position in government. Yes. He's a very good friend of ours. Way back.
Kakasama tayo sa college.
Of course, in the college.
Anong party yun?
And the University of the Philippines.
Tugod.
Political party.
He was
chairman. Yes, he was the chairman of the
1980.
Pare, bilib ako sa kanya.
5 to 87.
Chairman siya noong 1985, ngayon 2016, chairman pa rin siya.
Yes, the eternal chairman.
Who are we
Yes.
talking about?
Yeah, of course, attorney Jose Luis Gascon.
Oh, Chito Gascon.
Chito. Welcome to the show.
Yes,
Welcome,
Chair.
Chito.
Magandang hapon sa aking mga kaibigan dito sa Equal Justice, si Attorney Tiki, Attorney Jones, at si Attorney Ador, at sa inyong programa dito, Equal Justice.
Yes.
And,
And of
then
course,
sir.
we thank you, Chito, for gracing our
Yeah.
show this afternoon. It's not often that we are
We encounter
able to,
guests like of your
bring in
show.
guests
Yes.
here.
In spite of his busy schedule, because I understand that investigation is still ongoing.
Yes, in fact, that's the breath of fresh air, so to speak, because suddenly, I think it was last Monday when it was announced in the papers that the CHR, the Commission on Human Rights, is sending a mission to investigate.
Okay, my
this
first
matter.
question,
Yes.
I will get the first shot.
Sure.
Was this investigation that was initiated by CHR motu proprio on its own, or did somebody direct you to do it?
It was motu proprio, Tiki. Actually, the events that we are investigating occurred midday of April 1, magkakanghali. So we got reports coming in slowly, first by text, then we were seeing the reports also online. And so we made a decision there and then from central office to send our regional office team. So our fact-finding team were on the ground a few hours after we heard of the incident 2 Fridays ago. Over that weekend, they asked us for additional complement of investigators. So we sent our Region 11 offices. We don't have offices at the provincial or city or municipal level. We only have offices at the regional centers. So this was in Kidapawan. Our regional office currently of Region 12 is actually in Cotabato City. We'll be moving to Corondadal eventually, but right now we're still in Cotabato City. And so our first team came from Cotabato City. By the weekend, our Region 11 office was there. This is our Davao investigators. And then from Tuesday this week just passed, we also sent 8 people from our central office, which was a combination of lawyers, investigators, and forensics experts. So all told, we have almost 20 investigators in the area. As ang ginagawa nila basically is to conduct interviews and to collect information and validate evidence and corroborate testimonies. So this takes time, especially since it involved 5,000 protesters and hundreds of police officers. So this will take some time, but what we're doing is we're trying to investigate, interview victims, eyewitnesses, the local media, of course, because unlike many other human rights cases, this one was sort of like in the public view. There were videos that were taken both by amateur videographers but also by local media groups. So we'll also be looking at that evidence. Then we'll also be talking to the police and the local government. So that's how extensive our investigation is. And I told the team if it was possible to submit the initial report by the end of the week.
Okay.
So today is Saturday.
This week?
Yes, this week just passed.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that the investigating team might send us an initial report, hopefully by today. I understand they were having a meeting. They met together at around noon. Probably to collate what they have received, and they'll probably send us in due course. So that hopefully early next week, if not Monday or Tuesday, the commission might be able to take a quick look at the report, and we'd like to issue a report to the public, because the public also needs to see what we have.
So that will not be a
uncovered.
closed doors thing, it will be an open thing. You post it on the internet and people will get to see the report.
Well, we do have a website, but normally if we issue the report, we will call for a press conference. And
but the public will get to read the report.
yes, we believe in the principle of openness, transparency, and so we will of course issue to the public the commission's report. Now, the commission's report may or may not include the raw reports from the investigators.
Just the general findings will be posted, and hopefully it will be posted on your website, I suppose.
Yes.
So, Chito, given that the CHR is an independent body and you're doing this investigation motu proprio, meaning there's no directive coming from Malacanang or any higher official, okay, if there's any, okay, with respect to this. When the report is already consolidated in its right to be shared to the public, you don't have to get clearances from any agency or anybody for that matter?
No, Ador, because the constitutional framework for the establishment of the Commission on Human Rights, the Commission on Human Rights is an independent, non-partisan constitutional commission. That's why we're called the Commission of Human Rights. There are 5 commissioners, myself as chair and 4 other commissioners. So as a commission, we are competent to undertake our own activities in accordance with our mandate, which is essentially to promote and protect and fulfill human rights, broadly defined. And so we undertook this motu proprio under no direction from anyone. And when we release this, this will also be under no direction or control of anyone. However, I have to stress that we're not the only one with the exclusive power to conduct an investigation. There is, of course, a police team that was sent from Central Directorate of the PNP to undertake their own investigations since it involved their own personnel. We actually urged the Department of Justice and the NBI to conduct their own investigation, because you have to understand, in cases like this, it's better that there are as many experts that can take a look at all aspects of this incident, so that we might also be able to corroborate whatever we found
or counter-validate.
Because we've had long experience, our people in the Commission on Human Rights, in undertaking fact-finding, but we are certainly under-resourced. We don't have enough of the both human and financial and technological capacity to conduct a full-blown investigation, but we will do what we can with whatever we have, and that's what we'll do.
Considering that several agencies, as you mentioned, are undertaking JU, what happens in case of a conflicting facts or reports that the PNP, of course, they have their own agenda, they have their own people to protect because they are also injured party here. What if that conflicts with your findings or the findings of the DZRJ, which would normally prevail?
Well, in the case of the Commission on Human Rights, the extent of our competence jurisdiction is to undertake our own independent fact-finding and to make a set of recommendations in terms of what violations had been committed, who had committed them, and what degree of accountability should be exacted. Unfortunately, under the current system that I just described to you, Ador, we do not have the power to proceed beyond the set of recommendations. In other words, the Commission on Human Rights cannot, for example, on its own prosecute. So that's why I say that the Department of Justice and the NBI should also be involved in this investigation, because essentially whatever recommendations we might have, let's say the necessity of filing criminal charges, will still need or require the involvement of the Department of Justice.
But even if you cannot prosecute directly, you can still make recommendations based on your factual findings. So you can order file a complaint affidavit assisting the victims in the DOJ for a case of murder or something like that, which is, partner, the same as what happened to us during the 2004 yung kay Winston Garcia sa GSIS. We were trying to conduct mga rallies, ganun. The chairman of the CHR, we went to the chairman of the CHR because this is a strike, may problema sa empleyado and strike breaking and everything. So these are human rights violations. So we went to the Commissioner of the Human Rights at the time. I think it's Purificación Kasubing. And she issued a directive that we can rally without permit because it's our constitutional right. So meron siyang 3-page na finding and she issued it. But the question was, how could that directive of the CHR be enforced in such a way that it would be a binding that the person to whom it is directed will obey?
Exactly.
Diba kasi si Garcia was not obeying it eh. With water cannon kami, pinaguhuli kami, we were rallying in front of the GSIS. This is the actual event in 2004. And yet we were armed with that CHR directive from Commissioner Bisongbing that we are not bound to get permit to rally because it's a constitutional right. So my question to Chito is, if you come out with that finding, how will that in a way be morally or legally binding to the person to whom it is directed or the government to follow the findings of the CHR?
Which is why we are very careful with our processes. The way it becomes binding is the moral force that is brought to bear by the fact that we undertake it, our investigation in a non-partisan and objective manner. In other words, we are not taking sides. Instead, we are trying to help in uncovering, if not the whole, a significant part of the truth. And so we are very conscious of that mandate, and we do our work very judiciously. The second is, of course, after we make a assessment of the facts that we have uncovered, we have a deliberation of the commission, and so it is also prudently considered. We do not make rash statements. So if you will notice, despite the last 8 days since the events have occurred, we have not actually made statements pertaining directly to what has happened. If at all, what we have made statements about principle. For example, when we were asked, is it all right to use firearms to disperse a crowd? My answer was, live ammunition, while it is part of the arsenal of our police force, is not to be used for purposes of dispersal of public assemblies. There are protocols involved in that. You use firearms to counter an equivalent threat with someone who has also firearms. But if these are
to kill you,
exactly, that's what that's supposed to be. So you do not use live ammunition and long arms in dispersing.
But we saw on the video that the protesters were really getting violent. No? I could see a policeman on the ground being hit and being kicked and stoned to maybe nasa ground siya, no? And then other policemen got hit.
By the way, there are 2 police persons who are currently still in critical condition.
Which is my question. So, assuming that is the case, that there are 2 critical, well, on both sides, no? There are critical people on both sides. Would that not, without discussing the merits, no? Would that not be a justification, let's say, for the acts committed by some law enforcement? You know,
in fact, that was.
I guess that's what everybody's asking.
That's the version that the other, the police side.
Hindi naman, sa video lang, partner, nakita ko na there were rocks being thrown, no? Rocks being thrown, and then nagpapato, water cannon, and I would even see the police running back and forth. So everybody was having a tumultuous affray, no?
Yeah.
Now, along the way, somebody got shot, 4 people got shot, or 3 people got killed. So I guess the question is, do you examine this incident from the point of view of both sides? Let's say, do you also interview the victims? At the same time, you also interview the law enforcement officers
Actually,
to come up with a balance.
Actually, the question there is, who is being investigated here?
Yes, I get that's the question. Is it just a general o may tao talaga? A group?
Well,
or this is
the purpose of our fact-finding is to determine if human rights violations had occurred.
On either side?
Yes, and our approach is to take a look at the totality of the incident and to determine lapses, violations, and accountabilities.
In an article, Chito, that I read very recently, I think it was Rappler who that published this. It was written by an activist, Evan Hison. He called for accountability on the part of the organizers of that mass action in Kidapawan. He said that while government remains to be the most responsible for this, the left cannot hide. Of course, assuming that it was the left that organized this. He said that the left cannot hide behind
cloak.
yes.
Of what?
So just
that only government can violate human rights, because they are also actually using these farmers to advance their
Agenda.
their agenda, their
Yeah.
advocacies.
Actually,
And
yeah.
yes, and that, I think that is part of that's why the question to CHR is, who are you investigating? Are they part of it? Is the responsibility of the organizers also being
Actually,
put to
before,
light
before
in
the chair,
this?
before
Yes,
Chito will answer, can I just add an add-on
Yeah.
question?
Sure.
Because the impression, Chito, was that in the past administration of, I think, Eta Rosales and the previous chairman, the focus of the CHR was only towards the government side, not particularly the left. So the impression of the public was that that CHR was favoring the left against the law enforcement, who were also had their gripes. No? So I guess in follow-up to the question of Attorney June, what's your response to that?
Well, it's a fair question to ask, and a question I expect in a program that's called Equal Justice. Just to set the record straight, the purpose of the investigation here or in any other instance that will involve the Commission on Human Rights is we look at the human rights issues involving a particular incident. And when we say human rights, actually human rights pertain to everyone. Every single person has human rights. So the protesters have human rights, but also the law enforcers have human rights, and the community, the civilians, those not involved in either the protest or in law enforcement in the area,
or indirectly affected, probably.
But that have been indirectly or directly affected are also, in a sense, entitled to human rights.
Yeah.
So when we do an investigation, what we look at is the totality of the incident and to determine whether there have been violations or lapses across the board.
Yeah.
That's the first. But the second, and this is where it becomes a little sort of like controversial, from your question, TP. There is a notion in the human rights narrative or discourse of what you call the rights holder, meaning all of us, we have rights and we exercise those rights and we try to get them fully acknowledged, fully exercised, etc. And then there's what's referred to as the duty bearers. For those rights to be enforced and recognized, there have to be certain people who have to ensure that those rights are acknowledged, respected, fulfilled, protected. So in that context, government, and in this case also law enforcement, have an additional burden, meaning to say they are duty bearers. So while the protesters are rights holders as much as the law enforcers have an additional burden of ensuring that the protesters are protected, the community around the demonstration are protected. And so when you start pulling out guns and harming the protesters, that basically on its face, prima facie, appears to be irregular. But as you said, we have to understand the full context. We're not saying that it was wrong. We're just saying the principle is that they shouldn't use live ammunition. Now, in the circumstances of this case, we will now say whether or not, after we've assessed the facts, whether or not it was a violation.
So basically, just a follow-up, what you're saying is that, Chito, is that you hold the government or the law enforcement to a higher standard than the regular person, who should be given maximum tolerance or respect or whatever, and the government in turn or the law enforcement agents should have maximum restraint.
Yes.
Because otherwise, if things go haywire, there's an encounter, there's a bloody incident, usually the person who is more to blame because of his added training or added knowledge of the situation should be the law enforcement rather than the people, because the people cannot be expected to know what is happening.
The duty bearers have to be understood in the context of the incident as well. So in other words, in this case, if there's a crowd and there's law enforcement, they initiated a dispersal. Obviously, the law enforcement are held to a higher standard in how they conduct the clearing or dispersal of the. Again, because of rights, Tiki and we've known each other for a long time. While all of us have rights, the extent of where my rights can be enjoyed, it only extends up to when it does not hit your nose. When I hit your nose in the exercise of my rights, I have just violated your rights, even though we are both
Exercising your
equal
rights.
and both exercising our rights. So you need to look at the context, no? So Jun's question about, so you said they had blocked the road for 4 days. So certainly there is the right to peaceable assembly.
Under the Constitution.
Yes.
That's right. There is a right to peaceable assembly for redress of grievance. And so in that context, that's a protected right. But the right to peaceable assembly
It's not absolute.
is not absolute, and also is undertaken in the course of there are
law.
certain
The law.
compliance with law. For example, permits and all of that, no? And then also, if you block a main road, obviously the exercise of that right to assemble intervenes into the rights of others for the free use of that thoroughfare. So these are things that need to be threshed out. So that's why there are calls for accountability across the board. What I'm prepared to say now is that we are looking at all instances, but our initial focus will have to be on the violent dispersal, because there have been injuries on both sides, no? So and there have been deaths. So maybe the initial report will focus first on that aspect, but we will of course look into whether there was an abuse of the right to use the thoroughfare for 4 or 5 days. But that might eventually have to be at a later date. And the bigger picture is, of course, the reason why many of the farmers
We're there.
went there in the first place is because we have this El Nino, so
Bakit nga?
tagtuyot,
Bakit nga?
at
Why were they there?
gutom, at humingi ng bigas. Yun yung essentially yung sabing kagyat na issue.
Yes.
Whether or not there were other factors is something that needs to be looked at further, but kami long term baka kailangan din namin i-assess yung impact of climate change on the right to food, for example.
Actually, that's my advocacy
Yung
now.
environmental ka.
Yes.
But that will require something more than just what we're doing right now, which is a
Yes.
fact-finding
I'd
process.
like to throw in a question, but you may answer this after the break, Chito. Given that there are other agencies that are involved in the fact-finding investigation here on this incident, and in all probability, I would say that there will be some conflict in the findings because as Tiki pointed out a while ago, there are certain interests and agenda here that needs to be protected or highlighted or what have you. Given that, and I'd like to tie this down with the previous questions asked earlier, is there any effort on any part and any of the agencies, including your CHR, to communicate with the other fact-finding bodies of agencies involved for a joint undertaking? Wouldn't that be more prudent to do than do your own investigation that in all probability may contradict each other? Okay. You will answer that after this very short break from our studio. Don't touch the dial, okay? We'll be back.
See you.